Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about Mistborn Era 2, book number 3, Bands of Mourning by Brandon Sanderson. So as always, this will be full of spoilers, but make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and let's begin. So, Bands of Mourning. Bands of Mourning is the most recent Mistborn Era 2 book, and it is the one that kind of steps out of the character exploration and jumps fully into Cosmere fun stuff. So, this is the one where we kind of get introduced to the magitech that is possible on the world of Scadrial. Some people in the fandom suspected that, similar to on Roshar in the Stormlight Archive, the way they're able to make fabrials, which is essentially technology that's powered by the magic of that world, we kind of speculated that it would be possible on Scadrial, but it's too hard to kind of guesstimate how it will work. Even after this book, we don't know the mechanics of how it works. But there is some interesting pieces that are introduced into the story. So we have something that becomes referred to as an allomantic bomb, which is a cube that if someone has an allomantic ability, like Wax's ability to steel push, he can basically charge the cube with that ability, throw the cube, and then the cube will push metal away from itself like a coin shot would. So it's kind of interesting. And there are also other devices that they discover in this book. There's a ferrochemical device that essentially stores connection and allows you to tap connection, which allows you to speak the language of the foreign land that you're in. And there's also ones that allow you to store your weight and store your heat. And it's just interesting the level of technology that exists on the southern half of the southern half of the planet. Because in this book, finally for the first time on Scadrial, we find out more about the southern Scadrians. Because even in Era 1, everything that was happening was only in the northern hemisphere of the planet. Everything down to the movement of the planet and the ash mounts and all that kind of stuff was primarily affecting the people in the northern half of the planet. In the southern half, they were pretty much perfectly fine. They weren't targets of ruin or anything like that. They were fine. They had evolved and adapted to the hotter planet and everything like that. But when Harmony fixed the planet, he didn't change their physiology at all the way he did the northern Scadrians. So now, in the more regular, like Earth-like climate that Scadrial has, these people are like freezing to death because average temperatures to us is utterly freezing for them. So they ended up having to just pretty much deal with it until one day someone that later became known as the Sovereign shows up on the southern continent and essentially shows them how to make all these devices. It essentially shows them how to store their heat in order to tap heat, in order to be able to live outside of their homes and stuff, in order to just generally exist. And it's kind of a mystery throughout the entire story who that Sovereign is. It's sort of a mystery, not really, because everyone assumed it's the Lord Ruler having been resurrected, because he told the people of the southern continent that he was the ruler of the northern people. So everyone, while they're learning about this stuff, says, oh, somehow the Lord Ruler, Rashak, was resurrected and went south and basically became an emperor again for a period of time. But knowing what we know about Era 1 and Mistborn Secret History, it feels like that can't really be possible. So it kind of leaves you with an open-ended mystery the entire time, despite the fact that the characters think they know exactly who did this stuff. So this is pretty much immediately after the events of Shadows of Self, where Wax is still very mad at Harmony for what he's done. He's not putting in his earring. He won't talk to him or anything like that. He's basically abandoning his mission, essentially, that Harmony was putting him on. And Harmony kind of knows that that's what's happening, but being a god and having future sight, I feel like this is all exactly what Harmony knew was going to happen, and none of it is surprising. And he's literally just like, okay, now this is the part where I have to wait out his anger until he realizes why this is a thing. So it's really interesting, but it kind of, I don't know, it kind of puts a bad taste in my mouth, like a mild bad taste, I guess I would say, because it still feels incredibly manipulative on the part of Harmony, but it's like he can't not do that. You can't not use the future sight. You can't not have your God plans and stuff. And it's not as though that this part of the plan wasn't known before everything else that happened. So it's just a really interesting dynamic with these divine kind of figures and stuff. So you're kind of left, feeling multiple ways about it, which is exactly the way it's intended. So it was really, really nice. So this time, Harmony basically is the one giving out the missions. He sends Condra to basically tell them there's this whole thing we need you guys to deal with. And Wax is like, no, I'm not dealing with that. I'm not doing anything for Harmony or anything. And then like the Condra that shows up is like, well, we were actually asking her. They're talking about Marcy because apparently Wax wasn't Harmony's only tool that he's using. Like he basically has plans for Marcy and stuff too. So he basically Harmony uses Marcy to start on the mission, which he knows would then drag Wax in. Because everything that they end up going to come across during the mission and the investigation, it all seems to target Wax. It all seems to be drawing him either away from the investigation, therefore making him more interested in the investigation, or it's very clear that he is part of the motivation to some of the stuff that's happening. And it all kind of comes back to the sect, which is the group of people that his uncle is working with, because long ago in the first book he found out his uncle was not actually dead and didn't truly squander their family fortunes, but he was really doing some like backdoor shady dealing kind of stuff in order to help out the secret society known as the Set, which seems to be involved with this god called Trell that we know near nothing about. So when all that stuff starts to go down, Wax is like, oh, I have to basically get involved with it because he's had a revenge planned against his uncle since the first book. And he found out his uncle has captured his sister, who he thought was dead. So now it's a greater motivation. So in this book, when he basically finds this stuff out, he kind of has to drop the whole, I'm not helping, I'm not doing all that, and he's basically fully in. And which to me feels like, yes, of course you are, because that was exactly how Harmony wanted it to play out. So it's really interesting, again, with these kind of manipulation dynamics that happen. So we continue on and going, and then eventually it becomes about finding the Bands of Mourning, which is a artifact that the Lord Ruler, who they think was the Lord Ruler, came back and basically made a version of the technology that they have. Basically, they're bands that gives the wearer all 16 powers of Allomancy and all 16 powers of Feruchemy, regardless if they have any ability to begin with. So it's an incredibly powerful weapon that anybody could just use and be as powerful as the Lord Ruler was. So it's really fascinating, and it's probably the most precious artifact that could ever exist on this planet. But it's also a really interesting thing because it's like, as someone who read Era 1, you're like, what? Like, all of this is brand new. Like, even this concept and stuff. Like, what? Like, so it doesn't really match up with the idea of it being Rashak and stuff. So you're just kind of like, what? You're just slightly confused as it goes on. And with the technology that they have, they've clearly developed onto that technology on the southern continent because they also now have flying ships. And the Set has basically come into possession of one of the flying ships. And they've been trying to reverse engineer these devices and stuff like that, along with learning more about hemalurgy, because now hemalurgy information is more prevalent, or it's out there enough that secret societies like the Set are able to experiment with it and give some of their people abilities and stuff. So it's kind of interesting the way the magic is starting to truly affect the world and trying to, like, it's starting to force the evolution of the planet a little faster. Much faster than I think Harmony even assumed it was going to happen initially. So we end up in a situation where our main crew ends up meeting some Southern Skadrians who always wear masks, and they were basically exploring, looking for the Bands of Mourning until they got captured by the Set, and they were being tortured because they were trying to figure out how their technology and stuff worked, but they didn't understand their language without their devices, so they couldn't really even give information. So they were torturing and killing a bunch of people from the crew that was flying on the flying ship, until eventually Wax and Wayne and Marcy and Steris, this time Steris is much more involved this time around, and they basically all go on this hunt to essentially find the Bands of Mourning. And after some fun character stuff, there is one scene or collection of scenes in particular that I really enjoy. There's a situation where everyone essentially walks in on Wayne and Melan banging, like, after a train robbery. Like, they were attacked by bandits, and like there's just this huge action sequence and everything, and Wax thought Wayne was dead, and he was actually kind of terrified about it for a minute until they all like go in and see like they're all half naked and like canoodling and stuff. And they're like, "Oh my god!" Like Mercy is like, that's, she feels almost like it's blasphemous because Chandra are like religious figures and stuff, and Wax is like, "Oh, okay, you're fine," and just kind of like lets it go and stuff. And it's just a really fun dynamic. But there's also another instance where Wax and Steris are on the train as they're traveling to go to the next location and stuff, and she's basically like trying to get him to deal with his house finances and stuff and do some of the paperwork and stuff that he doesn't like to do. And he was explaining like the way he sees law enforcement and stuff like that, like a mystery and all this stuff, and he really enjoys it. And she's like, "Oh, it's just like that." She's like trying to find the missing clip from the balance sheet, like that 1 cent or whatever that's lost, like trying to figure out where it was misaccounted and stuff like that is just as interesting of a mystery and stuff. And then like we go off into some other stuff and then come back later where Marcy or Wayne or one of them walks in on them, and they're both just head deep in books and stuff and ledgers and stuff. And their Wax like exclaims proudly, like, "Ha, I found it! I found it! It was somebody mistipped somebody on this day doing this, blah blah blah." And he was like super happy, and they like were having this great actual rapport, like a competitive little rapport, like a little thing like that with each other over this very generic business stuff that Wax would not normally like. And he is really getting a glimpse into who Steris is and the type of person she is, and seeing that she is really awesome and wonderful and everything. And he's really starting to develop true affection for her, and it just works so well. It's just a really well written scene, and I really, really enjoy it a lot. So eventually, the crew does find where the Bands of Mourning is. They find a temple that basically has a picture of a statue of who is the sovereign, but like he's not visually recognizable to anyone. So they just assume, yes, it's the Lord Ruler, and he's holding a spear. And the spear tip of it is like aluminum or something. They couldn't figure it out. But Wayne, being the thief that he is, well, the traitor that he is, because he likes to take things and then he would take stuff, but then put like a hack in its place and call that a fair trade or whatever. And he's been doing it throughout all the books and stuff. So he takes the aluminum spear tip because aluminum is very valuable, and they just kind of have it. But they go through the temple and stuff and find two different separate fake throne or artifact rooms, I guess, like throne room type things where the artifacts would be. And one is made to look like someone had already ransacked it and found the bands, and the other makes it look like a perfect, pristine location and stuff. But they're all elaborately set up to misguide the people that are looking for it. So during this time, they've basically been forced into a situation where they have to ally with the set. And it's a really interesting reveal that kind of happens that I think is probably the least well-written part of the series. It turns out that, yes, Wax's uncle had his sister Telsin, but Telsin is actually above his uncle in the secret society of the set. So his sister, even after they rescue her and stuff, she's been the bad guy the entire time. They're going through this entire mission and everything, and like she's just so like bloodthirsty and everything, wants to kill anybody that captured her and all this kind of stuff. But we get no real information about her. We get little, like the way it's written around her, it becomes very obvious that she's a turncoat, and there's like little effort done to convince the reader that she's not bad. So the reveal that she is bad just kind of falls flat for me. And it just kind of, she's not built up at all. We don't know anything about the character. We've heard about her since the first book, but we know almost nothing about her. So for her to then just pop back up, in my head, I'm like, of course she's the bad guy. So it just kind of plays off that way. So that was just kind of a lackluster kind of twist reveal Brandon did there. But she essentially wanted the bands, and like they all wanted the bands, so like that was the trick of it and everything. And then it turns out that all the ones that they found, they figured because they found the fake ones and stuff like that, they're like, okay, somebody a long time ago must have found it, so I guess we have to deal with our constellation prize, which is the Southern Scadrian's technology and stuff. So they're trying to take all that, but not knowing the spear tip that Wayne found that is now in Marcy's backpack after she's been like captured and tied up and stuff is actually the Bands of Mourning, but it's not in the form anybody expected it to be. So she realized what it was and immediately learned how to tap it and stuff and became ridiculously powerful and started wrecking house and everything. So at this point, Wax has been dealing with his sister and his uncle, and he's been killed. They basically, in order to basically call a bluff, his uncle, who had hemalurgy healing abilities and coin shot abilities, he basically causes an explosion that causes a tunnel to more or less collapse on Wax, and Wax dies. When he dies, though, he's able to have a conversation with Harmony, which is where Harmony basically says, would you have wanted anybody else to kill her? Like, you found out about the situation and knew she needed to die, knew that there was no option or anything like that. Would you have been okay with anybody else doing it? He's like, no. And Harmony's like, well, there you go. Like, the whole reason I put you through all this is because you are the only person strong enough to bear this burden, and you're the only person that you would allow yourself to even have to deal with this kind of burden. So I essentially did what you yourself would have done, but I am sorry that it hurts, kind of thing. So it's like, it's an apology while not being an apology, but it's at the same time, it's like you kind of got to forgive it because you understand Harmony's situation and perspective and stuff. And the whole thing is just like, dang. It in my head, it reinforces the powerlessness between being a tool of a god and working with a god, kind of thing. Like, it reinforces Wax's own powerlessness in the scenario. But Harmony basically tells him, you can go back and you can live and finish this mission and basically be my sword, or you can be at peace and just go on. And it's a totally different type of adventure. And he already knows what the answer is because he knows who Wax is, and Wax is like, okay, I'm going back. Like, he brings him back to life or whatever. And Marcy realizes that she's using the bands and like doing all this crazy powerful stuff. She's like, I don't want this. I don't want this kind of power and stuff. So she's like, okay, let me go and get it to Wax, who can make better use of it than me. And she hurries up and gives it to him, which is at the exact timing that Harmony basically puts his soul back in his body so he can use it to heal himself with pewter and stuff. So, and, you know, gold and everything. So he heals himself and he becomes this epic superhero and like goes and clean house and like knock everybody out, and then Telson gets away, but his uncle doesn't. They basically thwart the set's plans and stuff, but some of them get away, and they basically kind of ended off by trying to redeem the Northern Scadrians in general by like apologizing to the Southerners for the torture and stuff they went through and opening lines of trade, because they know they're at a huge military disadvantage if they have these flying ships and all this other ferrochemical and allomantic technology and stuff. So they basically make a treaty and like, let's do some trades. It'll kind of make up for the fact that you didn't return with the Bands of Mourning, and like we'll also like give you different stuff here and whatnot. And they basically make a pact to allow the Khandra to take the Bands of Mourning because it's entirely too powerful of a weapon for anybody to have. So they give it to the servants of God, which I think was a great solution. I agree with that a lot. I'm like, yes, give them to Melan, because Melan is cool and she can do nothing wrong in my book, so it was a lot of fun. But this story truly does set up the next section of Era 2, where, as far as Brandon has said in his live streams and stuff, we will learn more about Trail, because so far the only thing we know about Trail is that there is a metal that the fandom calls Cheryllium or something like that. And that is the type of spike that Bleeder was using. That was the way she was able to have allomantic and ferrochemical abilities without having to swap out spikes and becoming like a myth wraith again and stuff. So it is interesting that a name that was kind of thrown out in Era 1 as one of the religions that says it knew is now possibly, if not likely, another shard that's encroaching in on Scadrial. So that concept alone is incredibly interesting. And I'm really, really interested to see where Brandon's going to take it in the Lost Metal. So in the next video I make, we're going to speculate a little bit about that. I'm going to do some more thinking about it and come up with a bunch of questions I can about, you know, the things I don't fully understand about what I want to see happen and stuff like that. And then we'll have a nice little discussion about it. And hopefully you all leave me a bunch of comments about your guesses and speculations and hopes and all that stuff for the Lost Metal. So make sure you're subscribed to check that out. But for now, go ahead, leave me a comment in the section down below. Let me know what's your favorite part about Bands of Mourning or Era 2 in general. How do you think Brandon did with this time jump and this whole new era of time usage with the steampunk and all that kind of stuff? Let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. And as always, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And I will talk to you all next time. Peace.